Roll for Crit presents How to Play Red Rising in 5 minutes or less or more. Red Rising is the hand management card game of power, rebellion, and betrayal in a dystopian world, designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alexander Schmidt and published by Stonemaier Games. Your goal in Red Rising is to gain the most victory points by playing and collecting cards that work well together. Each player begins with an assigned house tile, 10 influence tokens, and a fleet marker, and a hand of 5 randomly drawn cards. Players' fleet markers begin on the first space of the fleet track. If any player is using House Apollo, then they'll be given the first player marker. Otherwise, the first player is chosen at random. The main board has 4 primary sections, each representing a different location: Jupiter, Mars, Luna, and the Institute. When the game begins, there will be 2 character cards face up and overlapping at each location on either side of the main deck. Character cards represent unique figures from the world of Red Rising. Each character has a name, a color, an endgame point value, and various effects printed at the bottom. While they're laid out on the board overlapping each other, players are allowed to look at any face-up cards as long as they retain their original positions. At the top of the board are the Fleet Track and the Institute, and at the center a supply of helium. You'll receive points at the end of the game for advancing your fleet marker, adding influence tokens to the Institute, and collecting helium. On your turn, you have a choice of 2 actions: Lead and Scout. To lead, choose 1 card from your hand and deploy it to any one of the 4 locations on the board by placing it face up at the top of that location's cards. Most cards have a deploy ability as indicated by this symbol. After deploying a card in this way on your turn, its deploy ability takes effect. This is mandatory unless the ability uses the word may. Deploy abilities could grant you a range of effects, from manipulating aspects of the board, to harming your opponents, or even to deploying a second card. After deploying a card, choose a card from one of the other 3 locations that you did not deploy to, and gain it by taking it into your hand. This must be the topmost card in that location that is fully visible to all players. Each location has a bonus associated with it that you'll receive depending on where you gained your card from. For example, if you choose to gain the topmost card from Jupiter, then you will receive the Jupiter bonus. Jupiter allows you to advance your fleet marker 1 space on its track. Mars gains you 1 helium resource. The Institute lets you place 1 of your influence tokens there. And Luna grants you the Sovereign token. Anytime you gain the Sovereign token, you trigger the bonus ability associated with your house tile, even if you already had the Sovereign token before. If another player has the token, then you take it from them when told to gain it. Each house has its own unique ability. For example, Mars gains 1 helium anytime that player gains the Sovereign token. After deploying a card during the lead action, you may decide that you don't want to gain any of the topmost cards from the other 3 locations. If that's the case, then you can instead choose to gain a card from the top of the deck. Since the deck is not associated with any one location, you aren't guaranteed any one location bonus. Instead, you get to roll the Rising die. If after rolling, the result is one of the location's symbols, then you receive the indicated bonus. If it shows this eye symbol, reveal the top card of the deck and place it onto a location of your choice. This does not count as deploying, and so does not trigger the card's deployability. If the die result is this X symbol, then you choose the top card of one location and banish it. Banished cards are removed from play unless an effect specifically mentions them. Again, your lead action entails deploying a card, following its deploy effect, if any, gaining a new card, and either receiving the associated bonus or rolling the Rising die if you gain from the top of the deck. If you don't want to deploy any cards in hand on your turn, then you can instead choose to take the Scout action. To scout, simply reveal the top card of the deck and place it onto any location. Then, receive that location's bonus. As with the Rising die, this will not trigger the card's deploy ability. Once a player has either led or scouted completely, the next player takes their turn and so on. The best way to get points in Red Rising is by collecting and satisfying conditions on cards in your hand. In addition to their core values, cards may be worth more points according to the conditions listed at the bottom, usually concerning whether or not they are with certain cards. Any cards in your hand are considered to be with each other. For example, some cards want to be with cards of certain colors, while others want the opposite. Some are worth more points if paired with a specific character. Some take into account cards that have been banished, or the colors and positions of cards still on the board when the game ends. Some characters have endgame abilities as indicated by this symbol, which could allow them to take on a different color or name than the one they have. Some cards have block abilities in place of deploy abilities. If an opponent attempts to harm you in some way specified on the block ability card, you can reveal it to prevent that from happening, then return it to your hand. Read all of your cards and conditions carefully to make sure you take only the ones that will help you the most. The game ends when the following 3 conditions are met by any combination of players, or when any 2 of these conditions are met by just 1 player: having 7 or more helium, having 7 or more influence at the Institute, and reaching or surpassing the 7th space on the fleet track. Once all 3 conditions are met, or if 1 player has met just 2 of them, players finish the round so everyone has an equal number of turns and the game ends. Once the final turn is over, players trigger any endgame abilities they may have in turn order, starting with the first player. Then, players receive victory points for the following things: core values on cards, bonus points for any conditions satisfied at the bottoms of cards, points according to the space of your marker on the fleet track, 3 points for each helium you have, and 10 points if you have the sovereign token at the game's end. Whoever has the most influence at the Institute also gains 4 points for each influence token there. The player with the second most influence gets 2 points per influence token, and everyone else gets 1 point per influence token. Finally, you lose 10 points for each card you have in hand over 7, so try to be efficient and maybe don't hang on to more than 7 cards unless they're really valuable. In conclusion, deploy and gain characters, expand your house's influence, break the chains, per aspera ad astra. That's Red Rising in a nutshell. Did you get all that?